Hello everyone, Tyler King here with a new episode of NuReview. Today I am continuing my Peter Murphy review series by focusing on his 8th studio album, Ninth. Yes, his 8th studio album is called Ninth. And I've thought about why it was possibly called Ninth, because he's even said that it's his 9th album. And the only thing I can think of is if he counted the Alive Just for Love live album as an album, which it technically is an album, but it's a live album. Besides the point. Anyways, the album is called Ninth. This was released, it was his first album released post the third iteration of Bauhaus, which lasted from about 2005 to 2006 and culminated in their recording of their 5th album, Go Away White. Don't want to focus heavily on the Go Away White album because that is not the topic of discussion today. But I do think that the Bauhaus reunion was a good thing for Peter in that it helped to sort of rejuvenate his creative juices, get them flowing again. And Ninth, I feel, is the album that Peter Murphy fans kind of expected him to eventually make, in that it is his most raw, quote-unquote, heavy, most post-punk leaning album, and I think that it's appropriate that it comes within a few years of the dissolution of Bauhaus, not counting their most recent reunion, which is a topic, again, for a whole other video. But I'm going to be upfront about my opinion of Ninth, which is that I do very much enjoy this album. This is the album that Peter Murphy was touring for when I saw him for the first time. My wife and I were at his show at the Amoeba Records in San Francisco, and I I really hadn't liked Peter Murphy up to that point. I don't know why. I think that his voice was grating for me. I think that it left a lot to be desired, but seeing him live felt like that puzzle piece just fit in the right way at the right time. And she and I ended up seeing him, I think, 4 times on his tour for the Ninth album. 2 San Francisco shows and 2 Hollywood/LA shows. And unlike Unshattered, Ninth feels like an album that Peter is still immensely proud of, at least up until his most recent tours. Even on the tour for the Lion album, he was playing almost just as much material from Ninth as he was from Lion at those shows, and the song Never Fall Out was featured at almost every stop of his quote-unquote stripped acoustic tour a few years back. And it was also featured on both of his residencies, both in San Francisco and New York. His most recent solo album to have a dedicated night, not counting the Lion night, which never happened, but whatever. Anyways, so Ninth was released June 7th, 2011, which is 7 years after Unshattered, which unfortunately kind of tends to be the rule now with Peter Murphy albums, in that we have to wait a long time between them. So like from Cascade to Dust you had about that amount of time, between Unshattered to Ninth you had about that length of time, and Lion came out 7 years ago now, so hopefully we'll be getting a new album soon. Ninth also saw his first collaboration with current question mark guitarist Mark Gemini Thwaite, who is known for playing in bands such as The Mission and with acts such as Gary Newman and a handful of others. I know he did a couple songs with Al Jurgensen from Ministry. He's kind of a hired gun who will help to give an edge to certain artists. At least that's how I view him. Um, I really don't want to go song by song by song on this album like I didn't do on Unshattered, but I will say there are a lot of songs on here that I would consider some of my absolute favorite songs by Peter Murphy. The aforementioned Never Fall Out, I think, is a beautiful ballad. I really enjoy the single I Spit Roses, which sort of like something like The Answer is Clear from the Should the World Fail to Fall Apart album, is a dig at Bauhaus and the other members of that band. And I still enjoy The Prince and Old Lady Shade. I think it's been overplayed a little bit for me in particular, but personally, the highlight of the album for me is the song Uneven and Brittle, which fortunately was a song that I saw him perform at every stop for the ninth album, and I believe I've seen him play it since at least once. I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head. And Uneven Brittle is probably the quote-unquote hardest that Peter Murphy goes on this album. The guitar is very jagged sounding, the bass is very throbbing, the percussion is very up front, and about 3/4 of the way through there is a break in the instrumental, and he does a little bit of like a spoken word part, and then he just lets out this guttural scream, which to me almost sounds like a scream of triumph, even though the rest of the song, to me, is about how you can always want more and that you're never necessarily satisfied with everything that you have. But for me, I mean, every time that I listen to the song, and particularly every time that that moment comes on, I just get chills up and down my spine. I think it's absolutely a magnificent song. The compositions here are not necessarily samey, but I would say that it is the most quote-unquote live feeling Peter Murphy album since something like Holy Smoke or maybe Deep, in that it's not particularly overproduced like Cascade was, and it isn't, I mean, or Unshattered, and it doesn't fall into the realm of like quote-unquote otherworldly instrumentation like Dust does. The only song that really does that is towards the end of the album, the song Secret Silk Society. And I would say that that song and the closing song, Crème de la Crème, are the two missteps on this album. I wouldn't say that they're bad songs, but with everything that came before it, I feel like those two songs in particular, they just lack a little bit of something. I know that Crème de la Crème is supposed to be this very tender and swelling ending to the album, but for me, it's never particularly done that much. I tend to lose interest after the songs slow down, which is another highlight of the album for me. I mean, this album is just full of highlights. Um, I know that I've seen some comments of people saying that this is a Peter Murphy album that they're not necessarily big on, and they think that Cascade or Dust or some people Unshattered was the not his pinnacle but his last truly great album, and then albums like Ninth or Lion just have a couple of songs to talk about and write home about, and the rest is skippable. But for me, I feel almost the complete opposite. I think that Ninth, for me, is one of his best albums, and for a while it was my favorite album of his. You'll see what number one is when I eventually do the Peter Murphy ranking video. And I don't know. I'm not quite sure what else to say about Ninth, except that I just think it's a very strong album. He uses his voice a lot on this album. There's a lot of his trademark, like, oh, kind of screams and vocalizations going on in the background of a lot of songs, particularly on the beginning of Piece to Each, and also in a song like Memory Go. those two songs to me kind of feel like two sides of the exact same coin. I just, and again, I know I said I wasn't going to try to talk about every single song individually, but this is an album where I do think that nearly every single individual song is worth talking about in some way. I think that this was a great step for him in the right direction. It felt like it rejuvenated him a bit, particularly the tour for this album, which I know went on for years. I know he was playing some of these songs 2 or 3 years before this album even was released. And I think that the tour for this album really helped to get him back in the eye of people who otherwise might have stopped paying attention to him beforehand, like maybe people who were fans of his before and then they fell off for a while and then they started listening to him again. Um, yeah, I mean, like that, like it was just a relentless, never-ending tour with one-offs every now and then, and it just felt like it was never going to end. That is until the 35th anniversary Bauhaus tour that he did, and then the release of Lion. And it felt like he had a lot of fun playing the new songs live, just as much as he enjoyed playing songs like A Strange Kind of Love or Stigmata Martyr or All Night Long. And he really made the set lists of those shows accommodate the newer material. And that's something that I enjoy about when I do see Peter Murphy and he does have a new album out and he's touring for it, is that like with Depeche Mode, for instance, I saw them twice on their Spirit tour for their most recent album, and at the first show, they only played 5 songs from the new album out of maybe 20 songs. At the second show I went to, they only played 3 songs from the new album out of something like 20 songs. So I appreciate when a musician like Peter Murphy or Gary Newman, for instance, does have new material out and they extensively perform it in their live shows. I get that there are casual fans who are going to want to go to see certain hits. I mean, with a band like Depeche Mode, almost every single of theirs is somebody's favorite song. So I understand that. But I also feel like you have to walk the line between not necessarily just promoting your album, but also why would you release an album and then do a tour for it if you're not planning on playing most of those songs? It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But I'm going on a little bit of a spiel right now, which again, some things for a whole other video. Um, yeah, Ninth is an album that I I do come back to every now and then. I don't play it as much as I used to when I was first listening to it, but that's because it was new at the time. It was fresh. I was seeing him a lot, and I was trying to familiarize myself with these songs a little bit more. But I do definitely come back to it more often than I would come back to an album like, Unshattered or Dust. And that's only because with Dust, I feel like I have to be in a particular mood to come back to it. With Ninth, I can feel however I want to feel. I put that album on, I'm feeling pretty dang good, you know? It's a I don't want to say that it's the most Bauhaus sounding Peter Murphy album, but in a way it is. It really feels like it was a album whose songs came together organically. It doesn't feel like there was very much quote unquote like, studio interference. Um, yeah, it's just a bunch of really well written songs, very well performed songs. As far as my 3 favorites and my 3 least favorites go, my 3 least favorites would be probably, ooh, I mean, Secret Silk Society and Crème de la Crème are definitely on there. But again, they're not bad songs. I don't think that there's a single song on here that's bad or forgettable, which is, I mean, this is such a jump in quality for me up from something like Unshattered. So I mean, for that alone, I think that this is a great album. So, three least favorite songs would be those two, and then maybe Piece to Each. Yeah, that's not particularly a song that I tend to single out when I listen to this one. And then three favorite songs would probably be Uneven and Brittle, I Spit Roses. And then for the other one on the three favorites, that's going to be tough. Um, hmm. Part of me wants to say Seesaw Sway, but another part of me wants to say Never Fall Out. You know what? I'm going to say Never Fall Out. As much as I like Seesaw Sway. I didn't talk about Seesaw Sway, but it's a good song. I only ever saw him play it once, and I wish that that was a song from the album that he kept in his set list more, but that's beside the point. Yeah, so three favorites would be Uneven and Brittle, I Spit Roses, and Never Fall Out. Um, yeah, again, it's just overall such a solid album. I might recommend this to most people who want to get into Peter Murphy, especially if they've only heard Bauhaus. Which isn't to say that I think it's his best album. Again, I don't think that it is, but if you are more familiar with the, harder edged output of Bauhaus, songs like Stigmata Martyr or In the Flat Field, or a song like Mask or Silent Hedges or Kick in the Eye or Bela Lugosi's Dead, I think that you will find more enjoyment listening to this album first than listening to something like Holy Smoke or Love Hysteria first. As far as giving it a numerical rating, just because I don't tend to listen to it as much as I used to, and because I think that it loses its steam after Slow Down. I can't give it, I mean, as much as I want to give it a 9 out of 10, get it? I don't think that it is necessarily deserving of a 9 out of 10, but I do enjoy it a lot, so for that, and just for, yeah, just for the amount of enjoyment I get out of it, I feel very confident giving it an 8 out of 10. So thank you everybody for watching. That was my review of Ninth by Peter Murphy. What do you think? Do you love this album? Do you hate this album? Is it your favorite Peter Murphy album? Is it your least favorite Peter Murphy album? Is this the album that you would recommend to people who want to get into Peter Murphy? And if not, what is? I'd be interested to know, and I'd be interested to know your reasoning for it. Again, thank you everybody for watching. I will get more videos out in a little bit sooner fashion going forward. I hope, fingers crossed. My review of Lion will be coming out soon, followed by the video everyone's been waiting for, my Peter Murphy album ranking video. So until next then, wow. Until next time, I'm Tyler King. Keep on listening to great music, and I will see you soon. Thank you.